working on the car, obviously, I've got some brackets together. For example, we've got one that's going to go here where the seat hinge goes to hold the side of the box. That's going to work nicely. Unfortunately, all these bolt holes are obscured when the box is in, but that's okay. Alright, so I found some holes. These are actually factory mounting holes for the boot foam that mounts in there, and M6 steel riv nuts will work quite nicely. I'll just open those holes up very slightly and we'll be onwards and upwards.
Hi guys, welcome back to Connected and the build log of my Toyota 86 car stereo project. As you might have guessed, this is an episode a little bit about the details that are required to get this system working together. It's one thing to do the stack fabrication, it's one thing to do all the cool looking bits, but at the end of the day, it all has to mount in the car, it all has to work together properly, and this is taking care of some of those little details. And I've left this little clip in here at normal speed because it goes to show just how unglamorous and time consuming it can be doing a project like this where all of these little details need taking care of. Now, the thing is, we're, 14 episodes deep into this build and the car still looks like this. There's still a way to go. And the fact is that I can't even include a small proportion of the little details that have taken up time in this build because there's too many of them and you would be bored out of your skulls. But at the same time, details like this are often what I really enjoy about doing a build. I really love the end result. But when you're building it, sometimes it's taking care of things like this really neatly without having to drill new holes in the car and utilising existing mounting points and stuff that's really satisfying. So here I am making a mounting bar that goes across those mounting holes and shaping it to fit all the parts we need together. So there we go, that's all shaped together. It'll make a little bit more sense later, but we've got it there nonetheless. And now we're taking this electronic module, which is normally up on the parcel shelf, just there, and we're relocating it. That is because I've built a replacement parcel shelf. I really hate the flimsy Toyota or Subaru parcel shelf for this, and it's got a silly brake light that sits up really high and it rattles all the time. So building my own parcel shelf, but at the same time we need to relocate this module, which is the keyless entry receiver. So when you push a button on your remote, this is what gets that command and tells the car to lock and unlock. What I'm doing is mounting that here to the factory seat belt bolt because the seat belt for the back seat's no longer in there, it's not needed. So we're putting that in there along with the grounding lug, tightening that up. And I did a little bit of testing in this location. It really didn't change how the thing operated. It was still happy to operate from this location. So we did that. And then just arranging the wiring, and again, just a little detail, just cable tying this wiring into place so that it sort of lays like factory wiring ought to. And again, these things, it's fun to do, but it all takes time, it all adds up. So, flush cutting there with the proper cable tie gun so we don't have, spiky cable tie tails sticking out in the car. It's all part of a build, whether it's big or small. And in a big build like this, there's just so many of these things to do. So that's it all buttoned up. And now we're on to priming. So MDF obviously is quite frustrating to paint. It's a bit like a sponge. It's all fibrous and it soaks fluids up really easily. So you have to use quite a specialised primer. And in this case, this one is designed for priming end grain on MDF. Being that we've stack fabricated, it means that nearly all of what we're doing is end grain. So it's very, very useful. This is after the first coat. And you can see that it really has soaked in a lot of it. And there's still more to be done. But on these flat pieces here where it's not end grain, you can tell you got a pretty nice surface there, at least to start with. But it takes a few coats of this and it comes together nicely. Of course, not spraying with the vehicles in the shop. They get taken out to do that. You can also see the centerpiece here from the last episode, and up close you can see how there's still quite a lot of refinement work and more priming and filling to do there. Okay, so I'm doing some keyhole surgery here. We're going to be fitting LED strips underneath the edge of this flange in order to light the cavity inside the box. And these LEDs are going to continue all the way around the box, all the way back down, except for this bottom edge, and you'll see why later on. But the thing is, there is this wall in between which separates the sealed airspace of the subwoofer from the space that the amp is sitting in. That's all going to look like one chamber when it's done, but it's not. And the problem is the LEDs have to get through there, and they have to do it one of two ways. Either the LED strip itself has to get through there, or wires to the same effect. Now, this is not the LED strip we're going to be using, it's just a stand-in, an understudy, if you will. And the strip we're using actually has 3 wires. So, at some stage, the LED strip, all the wires that connect the LED strip, have to get through here. So I've got these holes drilled. We've got our thoroughfare for LED strips all taken care of. The last step is to fill that hole, and for that I've made some plugs. They're a really nice tight fit and I'm gluing them in anyway. So tap them in and then we're back on track. Ooh, done the paperwork. I had no idea.
Well, technically you still have to disposal notice.
Ah,
Which
yeah.
he has.
Yeah.
So I've filled in my post that in.
Yep.
And now begins a long time consuming process of sanding. Sanding, filling, smoothing, priming, filling, sanding. It goes on forever here, but the fact is that if you're painting surfaces, they really do require this much bodyworking and work to look good. It's really easy to end up with pinholes and inconsistencies. And I'm also trimming the outside edge in vinyl. You can see the threaded inserts there along the bottom there for mounting, which I've done for the brackets that I made up and showed you at the start of the episode. But the fact is here, as close as I've tried to keep all my stack fabrication, it still needs to be absolutely flat, and it's not quite here. There's still edges that would catch a fingernail, and if you're going to trim that in vinyl, it does need to be smoother than that. So giving it a good sand down. I mean, fortunately for vinyl, you don't need to go so fine on the sandpaper. This is probably 80 or 120 grit here, which is just fine. If it's a nice smooth surface, we'll have good adhesion from the vinyl anyway. But the outside is going to get a little bit of body filler as well. And in an upholstered situation like this, we can apply body filler straight to the MDF and it's happy. Like I say, the MDF soaks up fluids really well, so stuff like body filler will stick just fine for our purposes. And then applying that here as well. I mean, look, I'm going to make a disclaimer here. I'm not a painter. I'm not a body worker. I'm a car stereo fabricator who uses bog and uses paint in the process of building a car stereo. So you feel free to jump in the comments and tell me that I'm doing it wrong. That's fine, because I already know I am. This is a lightweight filler. It's something that's easy to apply, thin, and it's easier to sand smoothly quickly. It's not got the greatest structural integrity, but we're using it, to refine a surface rather than, adding great swaths of it to try and build up a shape or something like that. So that's working quite well, but there are still several rounds of that to do to get the surface looking nice. And inside curves, like I'm doing right here, they are perhaps the most intimidating, because sanding that and shaping it properly is a real pain around that front edge there. But I really wanted it to look good as well, so you put the effort in, don't you? So yeah, adding that first round here and continuing on. So, you know, getting the floodlight on there to help set that off real quick so that we can sand it and get to the next layer. That floodlight and a little bit of heat really helped with that. And you know what? It's arduous. It's not much fun. This is me and my thoughts about sanding and filling and filling and sanding and sanding and filling, because it all has to get done, and it all has to get done in, you know, a sensible amount of time, but it is just grinding away at it. So there you go. And it's dusty work too, as you'd imagine. So this is after more rounds of filling and sanding, and they're ready for another primer coat. And here I am applying, you know, one of the successive coats. So normally do 2 coats each round. So having done all the body filler on that, having got it smooth to the point that I like, this primer is going on. Again, not a professional spray painter, probably don't know what I'm doing, but it worked fine for this build, and it's a really high build primer, so that helps us as well to just refine that surface a bit. Of course, sanding after these coats so that it is nice and smooth, we don't have any hair or dust stuck in the coats, and that it's going to be ready for our 2-pack paint top coats. I've finished what should be the last of the bodywork sanding on the boot install, which I'm very glad about. Oh my goodness, that has been really arduous, but it's one of those things you have to do. Like they say, prior preparation and priming prevents piss poor painting. So that's what I've done. I've done it as best as I can. I doubt it's as good as some professional spray painters, but I think it's going to suit this really well. And the thing is, I'm going to be transporting them to a spray booth, and I thought the best and most secure way to do that would be to assemble them, which means we get a little bit of a look at what they are going to be like painted. Oh my goodness. Look at that. I'm pretty excited. These are nice and silky smooth. Primed. I've had a few imperfections just spot fixed. I'm hoping the base coat will paint over them fine. Oh my, these look terrific. I'm very, very excited about what these are going to look like when they are pearl white, just like the car, except without as much dust. Oh yes. That is going to be really exciting. I'm going to have some lunch, and then I'm going to drag these over to paint. Yeah. Definitely going to be time for this. I'm on my way to the promised spray booth. Can't wait to start spray painting this stuff. It's all loaded up in the back of the ute. And I thought I'd take a moment to mention pearl white. It's kind of a big deal to spray, and it's probably going to be a little bit challenging for someone like me who doesn't actually spray paint for a living. And if you don't know why, pearl colours are a little bit more complicated than a typical colour. When you're spraying 2-pack automotive paint, you typically have a base coat and a clear coat which goes over the top to give it its gloss and to protect it. There are some exceptions to that. Sometimes there's a single stage which has both combined. But a pearl is actually a lot more complicated than that, because it's got a base coat, which in my case is just a specific tint of white, and it's got a pearlescent coat which goes in between the base coat and the clear coat, and that has pearlescent flakes or tint in it, which gives it that pearl effect. But it's not clear, which means that the overall colour tone that we get when we spray paint this is going to be dependent entirely on how much pearl I spray over the base coat, which makes it a little bit variable. If I spray it really heavily, it could tint darker or more yellow than the car, and if I don't spray it heavy enough, it may be too crisp of white. So that's going to be a little bit interesting to do.
That's one reason that I have brought the scalp from my passenger side mirror. I gave this to the paint shop for them to match to anyway, and they were really pleased with the match they managed to get for this to the specific color code of the car. Now that's a reference, but it's not an absolute reference, because it's not uncommon, I've heard, for pearlescent colors to change their hue slightly as they go off, as they set. So I'm going to have to do my best and see how I go. Fortunately, that's not a whole lot of a problem, mainly because the majority of the parts for the sound system that I'm painting are not going to be adjacent to other panels on the car. They're not going to be outside. They're actually going to be freestanding. And so a small color difference is not going to make a huge difference to how they look. It's really not going to stand out. So that's kind of exciting, kind of crazy, kind of concerning. We'll see how this goes, but I'm very excited to have this on the go. I'm very excited to think that in perhaps a few hours' time, these things will have their top coats, their clear coats on them, and be very shiny and ready to continue assembling. Oh, goodness me.
So here I am in the spray booth. Very generous, the person who lent me the use of this for a day, because it allowed me to get a better finish so much easier. And also, you know, this paint really is, you know, you have to be using it in a booth to be safe to deal with these fumes. So here I am spraying the base coat on. Now, like I said, I'm doing it wrong. I already know that. I'm not a professional spray painter, so feel free to tell me everything that I'm doing wrong. I already know I am. And it's something that for a customer build, not necessarily going to be spraying that myself. This is really an experience for my own learning, developing my own skills and having a bit of fun with it as well. You know, I love building a system for my own car and saying, well, I did all of it, you know. So this is now sped up. I'm not doing that at that speed, but laying the base coat down anyway. And you can see that it is more of a creamy sort of white than the primer, which is a really stark white. I mean, most cars are not painted white, they're painted off-white, and this is no exception. Painting in here as well. I also took care to get this underside as well, like the top edge that you see here is actually the underside of the box, because that needs to seal together with the piece that will go on the bottom. I left them separate because it didn't make any sense to try and paint it all in one hit and bodywork it all in one hit, you know, because I've got to try and get the underside that you're seeing here and everything to work together. So yeah, painting them separately and then combining them later, but making sure that I've got a good paint coat on that edge so the two halves can be adhered together nicely. So it's a pretty intense day doing all that spray painting, but I'm really happy with how it came out. You know, there really wasn't anything to worry about with trying to match the pearl and everything. It all started to come together really, really nicely, and I'm quite happy with it. And look, that pearl looks amazing out in the sun and under lighting as well. So this is where I'm going to leave this episode of Connected. I really hope to bring you the next one soon to show you more of this finishing work and to start to see our finished look come together. But in the meantime, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time on Connected.